Are you ready to take some questions?
I certainly am.
Awesome. I think we've had a couple coming in. Some of them were not incredibly clear to me what the question was, but I'm gonna. So if everybody wants to, if you have questions, please type them in. But I'm gonna go through and see. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. So listen, I was jotting some questions down.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna go ahead and because I want to address those quickly. First, I want to thank Max. I think Max, you did an incredible job putting this video together, man. I'm sitting here all excited, I'm like, whoa, and I'm like, wait a minute, that was me, right? But thank you so much for that. Okay, someone asked a question, what do I reenact? I love doing World War II, but I do reenactment from as early as the Revolutionary War period to the 1960s, and I've got a wardrobe. Matter of fact, my guest bedroom is turned into a reenactment room, so I do all of that. If you look on, there are pictures of me and all these different things. Okay. Somebody asked about George Washington. I did not say that George Washington was racist. That the reason why I believe he said that he didn't want blacks fighting. I touched on some of it when I said that defending the country and full citizenship go hand in hand. And of course, there is an issue with that. The other thing is this, and I address this too with Lord Dunmore. If you are enslaving individuals and you are not going to guarantee them their freedom, they're not going to fight for you. And if the opponent is willing to free them, then they may be more likely to fight. And there's this hesitancy of blacks having guns in the first place. It is interesting because when the Second Amendment was out, it did not include black folk. So there's a hesitancy to put guns in black folks' hands. Somebody did mention the 13th Amendment. Yeah, that did not pass. It didn't ratify until December of 1865. And if you read it closely, you will see that there are certain situations or conditions under which slavery still exists today. And that's if you get arrested for, if you get convicted of a crime. The 92nd ID, I probably didn't clarify this. They fought under the American flag. And it was a different thing because, American officers, particularly those from the South, had their conceptions as to how black folk were and how you handled them. But France didn't have that issue. That's why those guys got so many medals of Croix de Guerre. But American soldiers, it was a completely different thing. And the individuals, they took individuals from the 92nd. Remember who I said did not have a lot of education? That's who they did their, I want to say experiment. What do you call it when you're dealing with people? Their exercise on. And so all of those preconceived notions going into World War II was based on that small group of individuals that they had dealt with prior to. The 93rd, somebody says, why wasn't the 90th? Did they mention the 93rd in the 1925 report? I don't recall them being mentioned, because there is a, oh my goodness, there's a term that we use in psychology. For those of you who've done a practice, you know what I'm talking about, but it's almost like situational bias or something. It's like, instead of taking all the data that you get, if it doesn't support your point, you just leave it out. So they didn't really mention the 93rd. Dory Miller, somebody said he's from Texas. Go Texas. And for my Texas people, yeah, Dory Miller probably should have been on a war bonds drive, but he ended up being killed on USS Lipscomb Bay. I do films. You can go on my YouTube channel. And so if any of you want to ever use it for your classroom, because I don't just do World War II stuff, I do Civil War stuff. I've done a lot of different things. Somebody mentioned Edward Carter. I have to look it up because I don't know about Edward Carter. Black tank. Oh, somebody talked about the 761st Tank Battalion. Yeah, there were a few black tank battalions. There was also a few black artillery groups. There was one in particular. There's a book out. It's called The Lost 11. It's about the Wereth 11. And here we go again. There was an SS unit that was executing soldiers in December of 1944, going into 45. There was a congressional hearing on it, and they had them all listed. But it had happened to black folk too, the Wereth 11, and they did not mention it. So that were at the level, they were artillery. I think that's the last thing. Somebody mentioned William Carney and how he got the Medal of Honor. It was disgracefully. Absolutely right. That's another story. I mean, there's so many stories.
Definitely. There are a couple more that I've seen come in. Somebody asked for like book recommendations, other book recommendations that you might have.
Oh my goodness. There's a very good one. It is American Patriots. It is by Gail Buckley. She's a daughter of Lena Horne. She wrote a pretty good book on history of African American in U.S. military history. There's so many books. Listen, I've got about 3,000 books in my house. If you email me, I can make some book suggestions. But if I had to go with one on this particular topic, it would probably be Gail Buckley's book. Of course, any book on the Tuskegee Airmen. And let me just say, I am so excited to be leading the next gentleman in General Charles McGee. I didn't mention this in the video, but you know what he did for his 100th birthday? He went flying. He was not riding. He was flying. He taxied out, took off, flew to Delaware, landed, came back. He is absolutely incredible. He is a great man. You talk about a gentleman. All right, I'm talking too much. What else we got? Any more questions?
Let's see. From Michael Barna, he asks, do you believe if Randolph had gone ahead with the march on during the war, it would have helped or hurt the cause of equality? Would it have been seen as unpatriotic or woke Americans up to the hypocrisy?
Oh, my goodness. You know what? Let me tell you. Armchair quarterbacking, Monday morning quarterbacking can be difficult. And particularly if you're a historian, any one small deviation in the equation can give you a different result. Would it have been unpatriotic? Listen, I don't know. But if you looked at the history of what blacks in the military, it would certainly say patriotic. And what was happening to them at that point, oh my goodness. The bottom line is, as a result of that, Roosevelt said, hey, you don't have to march. You guys can get in the industry. And even when they get into the war industry, there are riots at certain places because folks don't want to work side by side with black folks. And there was some pushback about letting black pilots fly, but you're going to listen. General may be 100 years old, but when you hear his story, you're going to be like, my goodness, the stuff that those guys went through. The bottom line is it allowed blacks into industry. It allowed blacks into the military, and they distinguished themselves once and for all. Sadly, a lot of them were not able to benefit from the GI Bill. Some of them did go to school, but in terms of housing, they would not let blacks live in certain places. And this is after the war. This is after they didn't spill their blood in the sand for 4 years. I'm sorry, Thea. I'm getting too excited. I need to calm down.
No, it's great. This is why you're a motivational speaker.
Oh, thank you. And let me tell you, the reason why I'm wearing this is pretty much I do World War II reenactment, and this is in honor of all those guys, including the general who's about to come on, and this is what he would have been wearing 75, 76 years ago.
Yeah. Let's see. There's a question from Monica Pahovich. Was there any national attention paid to Jackie Robinson and his court-martial at the time? Were there others who had a similar experience?
Well, remember, at that point, nobody really knew who Jackie Robinson was at the time, right? So there wasn't a lot of national attention. Mr. Robinson was hot-headed. And it's one of the things that Mr. Branch Rickey told him. He says, look, for the first 2 years, I need you to keep your stuff down. And he did. But the third year in the major leagues, that temper came out. His wife, she would tell you he had a temper. And listen, I would have to, even though I'm not aware of it, I'd have to say there were a lot of stories. Because that Freeman Field, those 101 officers who got arrested, they were going to court-martial. The only reason they didn't get court-martialed was because the black press got a hold of it and people started to find out about it. It ended by one person being fined for striking an officer, and it wasn't like a punch into the throat. It was like, moving his arm to like, get out of my way type of thing. But there was a lot of stuff going on and would have gone on. And the travesty is some of these men came home and were lynched in uniform. So, my goodness, there were probably other stories that we just never heard about.
Right. Right. And in the chat, so the Where with 11, who you mentioned, it's one of Holly's like soapboxes, one of her top things to talk about. So we talk about it every year on our social media and everything, and she put a link to that. But yeah, it's one of Holly's kind of pet causes. And then somebody had mentioned Edward Carter, and he's always my favorite Medal of Honor recipient to talk about, because he's this incredible person he was with the Flying Tigers over in China. He grew up in China. Then he was like, you know what? They sent him away because he was too young. And so then he was like, I guess I'll go fight in Spain. And then he went and fought in Spain. And then he came and fought in the US, and he was just raring to go and was so brave. So there's so much great stuff out there to learn about, definitely. Here's another question from Lisa Gibson. What untold story would you like to see Hollywood tell on the big screen?
Oh my goodness. What? You know, I really wish they had gotten this Red Tails thing accurate, right? I was so disappointed when I saw the movie. The good part was it made people say, oh, wow, black pilots. But I was talking to Colonel Jefferson in Detroit. He said that when they rented out the theater and took some kids to see, one of the first questions was, so did you guys all get drunk before you flew, right? And you know, and I was like, why would George Stone write something like that when when the truth would have been just as compelling? I just found out by the daughter of Colonel Robert Friend. She said it was not George Stone's decision to do that. It was Hollywood trying to make this thing palatable. So I would probably do a more accurate story of the Tuskegee Airmen. I'd probably talk about the 477, the bomber guys. But I think, you know, really talking about black women would be great. But the thing is, Hollywood wants to know if it's going to sell, and there probably just wouldn't be an interest for it. So as far as I'm concerned, my thing is any black story would be great, with the condition that somehow you can work me into it.
Oh my goodness. Here's another question. I think this might be one of our last, depending on timing, but keep them coming in though, everybody, if you have them. But this is from Emily Trick, and she says it's somewhat discipline specific and off topic, but she said, you mentioned the need for students to see models that look like them. And she's an art taught a month-long course on monuments and memorials. What are your thoughts on the removal of monuments? And if you could add one, what would it be?
Oh, geez. You know, what I'm about to say may not be popular, but here's my take on Confederate monuments. Well, let me say it, this is what it's been for up until the past couple of months, because maybe I'm rethinking this. But here's how I feel about memorials, monuments, and the Confederate flag. I would have no problem with any of them if they became symbols of who we used to be. You know, it represented one thing, but if we could one day say in the future, you know what, this is how we used to be, but we ended up coming together and we're no longer this way. For those who are Christian, you realize that the cross at one point used to mean one thing. You know, a cross was bad news and an execution. And then after the resurrection, it becomes a sign of victory. If those monuments and statues one day became a sign of how this country really forever dealt with the race issue, I would be, yeah, let's embrace it. But here is the problem. People's hearts are not going to change. It is really a hard issue. And I'm telling you, how, and this is why I say my thing is changing, how can you embrace something that stood for what it stood for? There is no excuse for it. You know, 10, 15 years prior to the Civil War, and I don't want to get, because we're out of time, we had the opportunity to deal with this race issue, and it was happening in the church. And guess what? There was a civil war fought in the churches. Southern Baptist breaks off, Methodists break off, and it's over this issue. And here we are, 150 some odd years later, and we are dealing with this situation again. I hope we do the right thing this time, because the last one cost us $750,000, 750,000 plus folk and 50,000 civilians blood in the sand. And I hope we don't go to that again. I hope we don't go to that again.
Well, thank you, John. This is a fantastic presentation and Q&A session, and we always love having you come talk to our teachers, and I think everybody else really enjoyed hearing you speak. I'm going to make sure that I share your contact information, because a couple of people had mentioned wanting to reach out to you about book recommendations and your YouTube channel and all of that.
Yes.
I'll make sure that they all have your email.
Listen, I want to thank all the teachers.
Oh, there's a hand up. Oh, Gordon, yeah, go for it. Sorry about that. I didn't notice that.
Hey, John, when you're talking about somebody to do a movie about Vernon Baker,
yes,
one survivor, man, I read his book. Man, that guy, holy smokes, what? He's a one-man war all by himself in Italy. That guy's incredible.
Yes,
that would be an awesome story. And then I just finished reading Dryden's book not long ago, and so you were talking about his wife. That the pair of them, there's another incredible story. You can get your man and a woman in the same shot.
Oh my goodness! Hey, yes, absolutely. Yep, because she'd have been a Tuskegee nurse part. Yep.
Yeah. So you get two. You get two for the price of one, right there.
Oh, absolutely. My goodness.
And your last comment, McCaskill for president. Okay, I'm good. All right.
Hey. Listen, I couldn't do that because I'd have to tell the truth, and I don't know if people really want to hear the truth. So, but thank you so much.
Somehow we got to start hearing it. It is time to hear it. It is time to hear it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank all the teachers. I want to thank all the teachers. Listen, I went back into the classroom this past August, and after 12 weeks, I had to leave. As a matter of fact, one of my former sixth graders was killed here in D.C. on the 4th of July weekend, and we've got to save these kids. So, thanks everybody.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate it.